So I'm going to be talking about Experience Builder. My name is Lauri Timmanee. I work as a product lead for Experience Builder. I work at Acquia in their Drupal acceleration team, and I've been part of the Drupal community for 14 years at this point. And in the past, in terms of community projects that I've been working on, I've led the development of the Drupal core admin theme, Claro, among some of other community projects. So I have quite a few things that I would like to talk to you today. So I decided to do pretty much a full rewrite of my presentation from last DrupalCon, so it should be pretty exciting. I wanted to focus today to just cover as many things about Experience Builder features and capabilities that we're going to have. We've talked a lot about what are the problems that we're solving and so on, but I feel like we have a pretty good grasp on those things already as a community, so hence the shift in focus. So those of you who were at the keynote from Dries, Dries basically repeated the vision that he set for Drupal CMS, which is to strive to be the gold standard for no-code website building. So essentially, to be the solution that everyone who is building websites with a no-code tool are striving to use. So how does Experience Builder contribute to this? Drupal CMS has essentially been split into 3 super high-level initiatives, or epics. So we have first challenges around the installation. What does it take to actually get Drupal up and running? Second is, after you've installed Drupal, what does it take to actually build a site that matches the requirements that you have for your specific site? And then finally, third, to launch the website in a URL or domain so that actual end users can visit your site. So how does Experience Builder fit this? So we are obviously in the middle of this. So Experience Builder is all about how can we make it as easy as possible for creating the site, the specific things to your business before you're launching your site. So that could be, things like building pages, creating content, building components, managing your site design. All of this is something that is in the scope of Experience Builder. So if you compare Experience Builder to some of the existing solutions like Paragraphs or Layout Builder, Experience Builder has a much broader scope because it plans to look at this experience from the end to end. So from creating components, defining your design, creating pages. Experience Builder focuses on a visual experience. So instead of working in code or in abstract tools, Experience Builder takes as many of the existing interfaces and turns them into a visual-first experience. How we integrate Experience Builder to the front end, it is essentially an edit button that you see in the top right corner of your site. When you click that, it launches the Experience Builder, and whatever you have on that page, you will be able to edit in Experience Builder. Before we go and launch the Experience Builder, I want to talk about briefly just the sort of fundamental design of Experience Builder, which is that it's a component-based, design system-driven Experience Builder. So what that means is that we have components that are defined in our design system. So those could be things like buttons, cards, heroes, and sliders, amongst many other things that you probably want to define there. So now you expose those components into the Experience Builder, and then Experience Builder allows you to connect and build different kinds of use cases with that. So that could be your pages, like an individual landing page or your home page, for example. It could be a page template. So that is an example where maybe you have an event content type, and you need to consistently display that event. So you can use Experience Builder to build that template. So that was the content type template, and page template is supposed to be the header and the footer of your site. And then we finally have lists, which is views. So when you want to take existing content, create lists, so you can use Experience Builder to define how would the content using in those lists, how would that be displayed. So the problem that this is solving is that the components that you have, they are agnostic to the use case which you have. So regardless of whether you need a button for your page or your page template or list, you will be able to use the same component to build that. So let's look at how we expose these components in Experience Builder. So the component library is exposed on this left sidebar panel. Content creators will be able to access the components in there, and they will be able to just drag and drop them into the page. Then, once they click a component, they see on the right sidebar a form where they can edit the contents of that component. So let's take a look at how would we build one of these components. So I'm going to walk through how would a button component be defined. Components could come from multiple different sources. So we could have a single directory component that defines a component, but you could also have a block, such as a menu or views, that defines a component, or you could have even layouts. So if you use Layout Builder, it uses layouts as the underlying functionality. You could expose layouts into an Experience Builder component. In Experience Builder, all of these components have a very similar editing experience. So regardless of where they're coming from, it will have a very similar experience. I'm now primarily focusing in with the use case of single directory components, or SDCs, because we're talking about the button. So let's see how would that look like. So here's a button that I have. In order to actually create a button component, what we need is we need to define what is the text of the button, where does this button link to, and then maybe some styles, maybe some variations of how does this button actually look like. So this would then actually form 3 different properties of this button component. How we expose that, or how we define that in single directory components, is in the component.yaml file. So we specify there that we need a text, URL, and we need some display settings. And then we specify what is the type of that. On top of that, we can specify some markup and CSS to make the button look like how we want it, depending on the properties and the design that we have. And then, just based on what you've specified in that component.yaml file, Experience Builder reads the component.yaml file and outputs it in Experience Builder. So this is the primary developer experience that we are intending for front-end developers. So you can start by defining your single directory components. You can write them any way that you want. If you're creating single directory components today, you can use the tooling that you're using today. And then, so long as your component YAML file is actually defining what your properties are, Experience Builder will be able to load it automatically. So I'm adding to the earlier flowchart an additional concept, which is that components might have additional properties that are more like, all right, so in this context or this site, we want the logo to be always this, or we want the colors to always use these values. So these are something that we call design tokens. So design tokens define a brand kit, which can be then fed into these individual components. So these allow you to enforce, for example, consistency. So if you have a primary brand color that you want to be changed, depending on the site instance, you could use the same component library with just different values of these design tokens for different sites. Or if you just want to make sure that all of your components are using a consistent set of values for these, so that you don't always have to remember what the color is. So now, the brand kit is also exposed to the Experience Builder. It is exposed to the same left sidebar. So the left sidebar is what we call the library. So besides your components, you can also define your brand. That's essentially the values of your design token. So that allows you to change the value of that design token. It changes on the site, and you can see that the changes take place in real time in the preview. Right, so let's dive into another use case. Let's look at how does creating a page look like. Right, so I want to create a new page. I go to Experience Builder. It is possible to do that without leaving Experience Builder at all. Just to give you a sense of like, the experience doesn't have to be, even though this is a different kind of UI than what Drupal has to a large extent, which is by design. You can do a lot of these tasks. You can complete a lot of them just within Experience Builder. So what I've done here, I've clicked the home page which opens the navigator inside the Experience Builder, which allows you to see all of the content that we have in this site. It also allows you to create new pages in there directly without leaving Experience Builder at all. The whole experience inside the editor is designed so that it's focused around what are the needs that marketers have. So what we focus on is fast content creation. So that means providing those components. But what we also provide is sections. So sections are essentially just pre-configured sets of components so that you don't have to construct every section by hand. So sections come essentially with some pre-set up components, and you can set up some values for the properties inside these sections. When you drag them into the page, you can modify any of the values in there. Whereas with components, the component is defined in a single directory component, so you couldn't edit that inside the Experience Builder. What we are also very conscious is that there's always a preview of what you're doing so that you know what you're actually doing. So you have some sort of expectation of what is happening. So with the sections, you can see a preview of how that section is going to appear as it's on the page. And if you're hovering over a component, a live preview of that component opens up as you're previewing it. All of that is generated on demand, so it never gets out of date. So you don't have to take screenshots yourself as a front-end developer and upload them somewhere. Yeah, all of it is done as you are visiting Experience Builder. It also includes things like undo and redo, copy and paste, just so that the experience feels like using any other tool that you are accustomed to, whether that's Google Slides or PowerPoint or Google Docs. All right, so we've made some changes now in Experience Builder, and we're ready to publish. How Experience Builder works is essentially that there's a workspace inside the Experience Builder. So when you're editing, you don't have to be editing just a one page or one component. You can make multiple changes at once. They accumulate on this top right corner, where we can see that it says Review One Change on the blue button. I know that it's a little bit hard to see on this screen, but the button over is there? Nope. Is there a laser? I guess there's no laser. No laser. All right, so we have this button here, says Review One Change. Then it opens up a panel over here, which is supposed to say Unpublished Changes, and it shows a list of all of the changes that you've done in Experience Builder. So it's not going to be individual components that you've dragged into a page. It's the pages that you've changed, and if you've changed individual components in there or created new sections or you've changed the global page layout, it would show those all as individual changes. If you've changed 3 different pages, even if that's multiple pages to those pages, it would list just 3 pages on that list. You can click any of the pages over there, and it takes you to show what the changes are so that you can review your changes before you publish. And once you're ready, you click Publish All Changes, and all of the changes that you've done get published to the live site. All right, so let's move on to the page template next. So page template / global regions is essentially what you would edit in the block layout today. So Experience Builder also exposes the regions that you have set up for your site. In this site, we have, for example, set up a header and a footer, which is the most common type of setup. And we can see that with the green color, we've highlighted that this is specifically something that changes the site globally, not just on the page that we are at the moment. If you click the header, it opens up a focus mode on the header, which now allows you to then make changes specifically to the header. So that is to prevent users from accidentally editing the header or footer or any other global region. What you can do in the global region is you can edit, you can use components, or you can use Drupal blocks to create content. So for example, what we can see that we've used in here is that we have few navigation blocks, and then we have a component to set up the logo in the middle, and then there's actually a third navigation on the right for the user login and some other button that exists there, which I'm not sure what it does. So it gives you a very powerful way of defining regions and the global page template essentially across all of your pages. So you don't have to define the header or the footer on individual pages, just like you can do with Drupal today, which allows you to build sites that have maybe hundreds or thousands of pages instead of just few pages. And you can use components and blocks, which means that you can actually achieve pretty advanced designs without actually having to write any code to define your page template. All right, next up is content type templates. With an experience builder, we have a separation between structured content and pages. So structured content is essentially what we have today in Drupal with the concept of nodes. That is specifically for content that is reusable. So let's imagine events, products, maybe blog posts that you want to display in multiple different places. Whereas pages are something where the focus is more on the visual presentation. Maybe your homepage, you don't have to reuse that ever. You literally just have the homepage and you create that once. Usually it's not something that you can really reuse. It doesn't make sense to create a content type just for your homepage. It's always been, at least for me, it's been really frustrating to have to do that. These pages, they provide a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do, but obviously then you sacrifice the reusability. Structured content, the challenge that you have is that they're not going to be as flexible, but you can do that. You can reuse them to create lists or lift-ups to show related products, for example. So they're quite different from their nature, and therefore we think that there should be a different experience for the two. What I'm specifically focusing on when we talk about page template is the structured content, because this is about how do we create a consistent template for a specific content type. All right, so we looked at the button example from earlier, where we defined some properties for a component. Let's take a look at how this would work in the context of a content type template. All right, so there's different ways in which these values can be specified for the properties. The most obvious way is just in what we call inline content. So that is when a content creator just goes on that right sidebar and just enters content in there. The other option that we have is that there could be a dynamic source for this property. So what the dynamic source could be is that instead of taking a static value that you set when you're adding the component, you say that, okay, this value should come from a specific field in the CMS. So let's say maybe on the text, we want to always use the title of this node. Or maybe there's an external API that you're using for showing content, and you want to map that into that. That could also be an alternative dynamic source of content. So how this looks like in terms of user experience is that we are going to expose a button which allows users to open a panel which shows them all of the variables that they have in this content type template that they can use for this specific field. So for example, in this case, I'm linking the URL in this card component to the node that we are displaying in here. And then when I say that I want to link a variable, it only provides fields that are able to feed a URL for these fields. So this is what we are able to do because Drupal is very strong on its structured data. With the type data system, we can recognize what is the actual data that we're getting from a field, and we can tell based on the SDC what is the input that the SDC needs, and then we can do the mapping based on those two, and only provide users the options that actually make sense. So this is very similar to the token system that we have in Drupal today, which you use for things like maybe defining your path auto settings. But the difference is that this simplifies that experience significantly because you're only provided with options that can be actually mapped, ones that actually work in this context. All right. Some questions that I've heard in previous sessions has been around, can I extend Experience Builder? Especially after the session from Dries, or keynote from Dries in DrupalCon, when people heard that Experience Builder is taking over the admin UI, that raised some concerns. So I wanted to talk about that briefly in this session, just to give a better idea on how we are imagining that extending Experience Builder will work. So modules will have a very specific and targeted extension points in Experience Builder. So we will specifically look at different kinds of use cases of how we want modules to be able to extend Experience Builder. So not everything that exists in Experience Builder is going to be extensible. So let's say, for example, maybe what are the actual buttons on this top toolbar? We might not actually provide that as something that can be changed to modules. We're going to have permissions for those things, but we don't allow modules to add new buttons in there, just to keep some consistency in terms of how the interface works. But then we are providing a specific panel for extensions to add additional things, so that there's a place where modules can consistently provide extensions for the Experience Builder. So some examples here is like, for example, the AI integration with Experience Builder, the Drupal AI module. It could show up in this extension panel. Modules could also provide components. Some examples of components that modules may want to provide is maybe an image slider. Image slider modules is a common example of modules that people are using from the contributed ecosystem. So the extensions panel specifically provides a place for those modules to provide their components. The idea is that there is going to be a way in future in which you could take, as a front-end developer, you could say that I want to promote a component from the extensions in the component library. So the extensions is more focused around maybe someone who is setting up the experience. But then once you've actually validated that the slider works and it looks good with your branding and all of that, then you could expose it in your library, which your content creators would be using primarily. Once we open up the Drupal AI module, it could open up a modal, which gets all of the context from Experience Builder. So it knows what component you have selected. It knows what is the content of your page, and it can even manipulate the state of the Experience Builder. So we have some examples here that, for example, the AI module could fix the grammar of what you have specified in a component. Experience Builder this extension would simply read what have the user selected in Experience Builder. It would read that text from there, and then it would be able to write that back into Experience Builder. And this is already something that extensions can do with a proof of concept that we've built as an API for modules. Some other examples are that maybe the Drupal AI module wants to provide an extension to generate a new section. In that case, it can, again, read what has the user selected. But in that case, instead of modifying the component that has been selected, it would just use that as a pointer to where it should be adding this new content that it's generating. Because it's instead of modifying it, it's generating new content. So Form API might be of interest to many of you. I know that there's this love and hate relationship that we have with Form API, but the good news are that even though we are building Experience Builder with React, we are actually building it in a way where Form API continues to work for the forms that we are exposing on this right sidebar panel. So there's quite a bit of hackery going around that. So what we are doing essentially is just taking the Form API structure, and then we are reactifying what comes out from there. What that enables is that if you have to use a hook form alter, technically you can still do that with the form that we have on the right sidebar. Or if you have existing modules that are providing things that you need to be able to expose in the Experience Builder, you can use that existing code will continue to work with Experience Builder. Obviously with some limitations in terms of if you're doing very advanced things with your module, there might be some minor changes that you have to make in order to make it fully functional with Experience Builder, but it wouldn't have to be a full rewrite of your module in order for it to work with Experience Builder. Actually, the bigger challenge probably is for us that the user experience of Experience Builder is drastically different from what we see outside, where it probably makes sense to think from the perspective of, okay, how can I actually integrate my module with Experience Builder in a way that the user experience of your module feels cohesive with the rest of Experience Builder. So that's probably the real problem that we run into, not the fact that if your module works at all with it. All right. I want to address the elephant in the room, which was brought up earlier in the day in the Q&A. So I'm not sure if it is an elephant in the room, but that's what I'm going to call it still. So in terms of the migration, there's two fundamental principles that we've taken to approach creating a migration plan. The first key principle is that we want to avoid forcing any of the existing sites to migrate as long as possible. So that's essentially something that we are learning from the Drupal 7 experience, is that there's a lot of cost that goes into migrating. And if you're totally happy with what exists today, you should be able to do that. You should be able to continue running that as long as possible. Obviously, there's some limitations to that, but we have a lot of sites that are on Paragraphs and Layout Builder today that we should be able to continue supporting those for a very long time in future. But the second key principle is that we want to provide an easy way for all of the sites to benefit from Experience Builder if they so choose to do. If they like what Experience Builder is doing, we want to provide them an easy way to get access to Experience Builder. So it might seem that they are in conflict, that because of the principle one, we are saying that, okay, we're not migrating sites. Well, we are thinking about that just because we want to give Experience Builder to the hands of existing sites. So let's talk about the approach that we have. This is still pretty high level. We've made a conscious decision to not go too deep into the migration space at this point, but we've been very conscious about it from the beginning, just to make sure that we are not cornering ourselves into something that would completely make it impossible for us to provide this in future. So first is that we want to allow multiple solutions to coexist in a single site. So what we want to avoid is essentially forcing you to migrate a large amount of content in a one go, because that is very costly. You should be able to do it slowly, maybe over time, or maybe for things that actually provide more strategic value to your company. Like, let's say maybe you only want to use Experience Builder for your landing pages because of, maybe your content creators are happy with what exists for your other content types. So we want to make use cases like that easy to meet with Experience Builder. So what we're essentially going to do is very similar to what Layout Builder provides today, where you can, per content type, specify whether you want to use Experience Builder. But this might be, instead of specifying that inside a content type that you can use both Layout Builder and something else, it might be that within a single content type, you're making a decision if this content type should have the Experience Builder enabled at all. And it may then impact the whole experience around all of the different view modes and everything that is happening inside that specific content type. The same principle applies to other things. So for example, when we talked about the page templates, such as the header and footer, we would also in those cases think about, okay, you need to be able to have the block layout exist, but then there's a button to say that, okay, move this into Experience Builder. So even though I only showed one example of that, I don't necessarily think that it's helpful for me to show the same button in multiple different screens. So just explaining the context of that we can do the same strategy on all of the capabilities essentially that we're taking over for something that exists today. So the second part of this approach, which is key, is that we want to integrate with the existing assets that you have built with the existing tools. So that could be things like blocks, layouts, and paragraphs. So that's the motivation behind building the components in Experience Builder in a way where they can be sourced from multiple different places. It allows us to use things like your menu blocks and so on in Experience Builder without having to fully rebuild them into some sort of new paradigm. So that is essentially this whole diagram that I showed earlier. We already have support for blocks. So essentially Layout Builder migration to some extent has been already proven. This was based on what we were talking about earlier, was with the team of developers working on this, was probably one of the hardest problems to solve, was being able to load blocks into Experience Builder and being able to load the forms to configure blocks. So we have a support for adding blocks into Experience Builder already, which means that for Layout Builder we are on a good path to get a migration happen eventually. Obviously there's more work to facilitate the process, but this is the first step of that, which we've been able to accomplish already. So the third step besides providing those integrations to existing assets, is that we want to provide tooling to move existing content to Experience Builder. So let's say you have a page that you've created. You should have a way to move that over into Experience Builder. So now you have, let's say you have a layout builder page which is using blocks. How can I take that into Experience Builder? So this is essentially a mock-up of how that experience could look like. So let's imagine you go on a content that has been built using Layout Builder today. You get a prompt which says, would you like to move this content to new Experience Builder? Experience Builder offers enhanced tools for creating and customizing your content with flexible no-code approach. And then you can choose here if you want to move this content into Experience Builder or not. Once you see it in Experience Builder, at that point you can make a decision if that content actually looks like how you want it to look like. If something breaks in a very fatal way when you do this, you can still revert at that point. You can go back into the old way. Maybe there's some minor things that broke in terms of like maybe the padding or some colors are not exactly right. Well, now you can use Experience Builder then to fix up the page and make it actually match what you want it to be. So essentially we are outsourcing a lot of the work in terms of migration into the content creator, and because they can do the validation of if the content looks as it should look like. All right, you might be wondering where are we today in terms of this very ambitious timeline or very ambitious vision of taking existing concepts from Drupal into this visual first experience. So we gave a demo at DrupalCon Barcelona, which is the first major milestone for Experience Builder. That was already based on a working code base, so it wasn't like a Figma prototype or anything like that. We actually we had the whole Experience Builder working to an extent where we could build a demo with that. So now we are in between the demo and the early preview 1. And the early preview 1 for Experience Builder is essentially just going to be one page that we give for users, and they can actually start creating something in there to test it themselves. So the demo was we used the Experience Builder to create something. We now do the same step in the early preview 1, but so that you can do it and actually experience how is it to create something with Experience Builder. Then later in the year, we would have early preview 2, where we expand from having a single page into actually being able to create multiple pages, so that you can actually start seeing how would this look like in terms of if I were to build an actual site. And then we would have a stable release in Q3 2025. Obviously, there's an asterisk in here, which is that all of these dates are aspirational because it depends on a lot of open source contributors. But this is based on just what our velocity looks like right now and what we anticipate to have to happen before we believe we can release Experience Builder to these milestones. So we've obviously been working on this for already 6 months, so we have a good idea on what that velocity looks like. So we have a fairly high confidence that we can meet these timelines. So we have code sprints tomorrow. Hope many of you are coming there. There are many ways in which you can help us at Experience Builder to move faster. First, if you want, something that is actually probably the most helpful thing at this point is start building SDC-based design systems and test them with Experience Builder. Provide us with feedback on what kind of challenges you run into when you try to integrate your design system with Experience Builder. There's many folks who are already integrating their existing design system and providing us feedback on, okay, these kinds of things are not working with Experience Builder based on what we are doing with our design system today. Can you think about this? The merrier with this type of feedback, the more use cases that we can cover on this early stage when it's easy for us to make changes, the better. If you have any feedback on the vision that we have, you can come talk to me either today or tomorrow. I'm very happy to hear about the use cases that you might have, what kind of challenges you are anticipating with the direction that we're taking. I'm very open to hearing that type of feedback from all of you. Also, if you don't have the time during the event, you can reach out to me on Drupal Slack after the event as well. And we have a lot of issues in the issue tracker that are ready to be worked on. And we also have sort of a concept of mini tracks on the Experience Builder. We've kind of borrowed the concept of Drupal CMS, where Drupal CMS has tracks and Experience Builder is one of the tracks, but now Experience Builder is probably the largest of the tracks, so we've divided it into smaller tracks. So we've had individual organizations like Salsa Digital and Accelerant taking on ownership of those tracks. And if you're interested in that, I'm very happy to jump on a meeting and kind of define, depending on what kind of interest you have, what kind of people you have available to contribute, to figure out what would be a good match in terms of work that we have available. So before we go into the Q&A, just to wrap up, Drupal's new Experience Builder will enable site builders without Drupal experience to easily theme and build their entire websites only using their browser. And it will enable content creators to compose content on any part of the page without relying on developers. If you want to get involved, we have a Drupal.org project, Experience Builder. The code is all in the project itself. It can be downloaded and installed on Drupal 11. So feel free to test it out and provide us feedback. We are chatting on the Experience Builder channel on Drupal Slack. So feel free to come say hi over there. So that's what I had to show about Experience Builder today. Do we have any questions? I'm sure that we probably have a lot.
Yeah, hi Lauri. I had a question around you showed lot of things in the vision. I was thinking about more of a backend part of it, like how it will all come together in front end. Like we are using React to basically connect the things. Like you talked about the storage part of it, and once users will be able to see what changes they have done. So how all of it will be stored and move it further from there, or will it integrate with the review processes of Drupal as well, like draft, review, states, etc.
Yes, so we are planning to leverage workspaces under the hood. So everything in our Experience Builder is auto-saved. And it gets saved the moment that you make a change in there. That gets saved in a temporary storage. And then from a temporary storage, we would be saving it into the actual entity if the entity is valid. And that's where we would be leveraging workspaces to do the actual storage of the revisions. So now what we are going to do with the workspaces is we are going to essentially manage the workflow state per workspace. So you can say that you can mark a specific workspace into a draft or reviewed or any status that you define in your workflow. So instead of sending individual pieces of content through the review process, you can now send multiple pages through the review process and then publish them at once. You can still do it for an individual page, and we are kind of considering from UX perspective, maybe there should be an easier way, like an accelerated way to go take an individual page through that process. But either way, workspace is essentially, I guess, the key piece of the backend services that we use for providing that experience.
So that means workspaces would be a dependency for Experience Builder?
Yes. And so there's a work that we're doing with Tag One actually to rebuild the content moderation module on top of workspaces, so that if you're using content moderation today, that there's an easy way to go from content moderation into workspaces. So that way it doesn't become a blocker for individual sites that are using content moderation today.
Oh, that's nice. And another question I had was around the form alter which you talked about. So will it support the advanced use cases like let's say Ajax API? Will it support that as well?
So Ajax API has probably some limitations in which it can do in there because we make some modifications to the markup. But theoretically, it does work. For example, we have the media library working in there, which is powered by the Ajax system. So Ajax system is one of those examples. I think States API is another one, where it might be very challenging for us to do a full coverage where everything is just going to work as you've defined it in the form API. So those kinds of things you might have to modify in order for it to work with Experience Builder. But it might be as simple as modifying specific selectors if you are in editing for Experience Builder.
That's great to know. Thanks.
Thank you, very promising. I have a question about what is the page. It's node or what entity type represents the page, and the same for the component. Is it block or what?
So page is a new entity type that is provided by the Experience Builder, and components it's a new concept that Experience Builder introduces. It's not, block essentially becomes an Experience Builder component, so it's a one level lower than a block in the context of Experience Builder. So a single directory component can become a component in Experience Builder, and block can become a component in Experience Builder.
And they can be translated separately, right? So if we have, for example, a section with paragraph and button, we can translate the whole section, or specifically the paragraph separately and button.
So in terms of the components, they are stored in a single JSON tree, all of the values for all of the components. So those would be then essentially, we would provide a one translation, you would take the whole page to be translated, and it would have all of the components in there.
So it will be out of sync if we translate the page and then move button before the paragraph. We should fix each translation separately, right?
Yeah, so there's two ways in which we are going to support translation. So we're going to have asymmetric and symmetric translation. So if you want to only translate the text, you are going to be able to configure your site in that way. But if you're using asymmetric translations, in that case, the order of the components will remain out of sync. But that might be something we could still theoretically support, because we are storing the actual content separately from where the content is. So we have a lot of options in terms of how we can actually, what kind of translation experiences we could provide. So theoretically, we could add even more advanced options of translation, like you're describing.
Yeah. Okay, so page can be a configuration, right? Or content?
Page is content. Although there might be use cases where you want to do content deployment, which is not part of the roadmap right now, but I've been already discussing, for example, with Alex Spott on how we could enable use cases where we would allow you to provide a default version of a content that you created with Experience Builder easily, so that you can deploy that in your pipeline.
Better to deploy the front page and other main pages as a configuration, but keep some internal pages as content.
Yeah.
And one more question about React. So maybe use web components instead of React, because we have fans of Vue.js, React, Angular, other frameworks, and web components look like the general approach for all future components. So maybe consider moving now to web components instead of releasing it with React.
Yeah, so for the admin UI itself, we've made the decision to use React, but it doesn't prevent anyone for their site, to use something else than React. So if you want to use Vue.js on your front end of your site, it's going to work. It can work with Experience Builder, even though we are using React. It's specifically the admin UI parts that are built with React.
I mean, the admin UI, maybe web components will be more general approach instead of React.
So there's many reasons in which we did a lot of thinking around different frameworks, and there's a lot of benefits in which we got from React in terms of they have a lot of tooling around these dynamic sort of interfaces that we have in this case with Experience Builder, which that's exactly what enables us to go as fast as we've been going so far, because we can leverage all of that tooling to our favor.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you, Lauri, for this wonderful session. I want to know a little bit about what is the future of Layout Builder, and a follow-up would be like, not in a, don't take it in a wrong way, like what happens to Layout Builder if Experience Builder comes, right? It's basically deprecated, right? So
Layout Builder, in terms of support, it will receive support for the foreseeable future. But in terms of new sites, the goal is that there's not going to be use cases anymore in future in which you would need to use Layout Builder instead of the Experience Builder. It might not be that, it will take some time for us to get the full coverage of what you can do with Layout Builder to get it to Experience Builder. So that's why we have them side by side available. But probably in a reasonably soon, I would say maybe by 2026, we can expect that majority of our new sites that we built are built with Experience Builder instead of Layout Builder. So the goal is to make it irrelevant for new sites, but keep it working for existing sites so that we don't force them to migrate into Experience Builder.
So from a vision point of view, why it was not extended and why abandon and create a new stuff?
So the challenge we have with Layout Builders is that it's it's not necessarily supporting the vision that we have very well today. It would be we believe that this approach is significantly less painful, both to the team that is building this, but the existing sites that are using Layout Builder. Because if we started extending Layout Builder the way that it is today, we would be forcing individual sites into this new experience, which could be very painful because a lot of majority of the sites that are using Layout Builder, they install maybe 10 to 15 modules that extend Layout Builder, and they do customization on top of it. Well, now we start customizing that experience as well, so it's going to be quite a lot of entropy to manage in there.
I think we have one more question from this job.
Okay, yeah, it's a bit of a demystification question, because been working with Drupal for years and years, and every site, when you get a client and it comes to branding, you generally create a whole new theme. Now we're targeting a different persona now. Somebody's an ambitious site builder, marketer, able to theme it, not rely on developers and such. And so you watch things like that, and there's all the talk about creating new components, right? And then you're moving into developer land. I also noticed that you said one of the best things someone can do to contribute is create a new design system based on the components. Is that where the answer lies? Because it's a big question. If I come in and I want to use the user interface to build a new website and brand it differently, where does themes play in with that? That's kind of where I go, you might do a design, but because we've got the Starshot demo design system now, and is that the only design system that's available? Is there going to be a library of what used to be themes, now a library of design systems? Is that the...
So I think there's a short-term and long-term answer to this. Where in the short term, the answer is that it's going to be these default design systems that we provide that is going to cater to this need of getting your brand. Many organizations have well adopted their own brand already, but there's also many organizations that don't necessarily has as strong of a brand. Many startups and so on that can apply an existing brand. That's definitely a trend that is happening in the world where this is like if Chad CN style of UIs or and so on that they are using to build startup brands. So there's a lot of consistencies like that we can, in the short term, support with that approach. In the long term, the goal is to make it very easy to customize your components in Experience Builder. So once we have the basic foundation built for building pages, page templates, content type templates, and so on, the plan is to reshift the focus into, all right, how do we actually create components with this? Because the same foundation can actually support that. It's just that the granularity of the properties that you have at that point is much higher, and you start dealing with a lot more complexity in that scenario. So that's probably something that we would be focusing more on 2026 type of time frame at the moment. So I hope that satisfies the answer in terms of like this is what we are doing in short term and what we are planning to do in long term. All right. Thank you everyone for showing up.